Arai Guma by Marc Yamaguchi. Chapter 11. Cherry Blossoms. Rose was tickled pink when Rory stopped the family from eating until Ricky had come home. Rory was turning into a fine lad. Ricky made sure of that. In some ways, Rory was like his father. He could be stubbornly loyal and fought for what was in the best interests of the family. Once Rory makes up his mind, Rose chuckled to herself. Well, the new tree burrow worked out after all. She felt the cool morning breeze, and it now informed her that not only Ricky, but also Rachel and Ray had arrived at the foot of their tree. The sakura tree was in full splendor, and it was thanks to their adoptee, George, the family had migrated to the largest park in the city. George warned them it was once overrun with coyotes, but since the Great Cull, many animals had returned to start over, especially the hares. George had befriended Ray when they were pledges, but he was raised here, and he told Rose she would come to see the beauty of the falling petals in spring. Ray was impressed by the enormity of the surrounding Walkies' homes and how they generated a never-ending source of food. Rachel was content the Walkies left them alone, and because these trees towered above the park, their dogs never paid them much attention either. Ricky had an eye for tree burrows and reclaimed a knot for him and Rory to keep cool in the day. Even if Severn had survived the outburst in his lair, he would have been mortified to see his reign snuffed out by the Walkies. Little did he know, it was Seth who had caused half the city's raccoons to lose their lives. In his zeal to purge the Severnites of infiltrators, Seth inadvertently caused the budding empire to fall like dominoes. Seth's sentries had violated the unspoken boundary of killing a living member of the Walkies. While his sentries could be forgiven for defending themselves because they behaved like any other animal when cornered, Seth was blinded by his devotion to his master and satisfying his need to be right. It was foolhardy, and he didn't live to appreciate the consequences of his vengeance. Chester was no ordinary English Mastiff. He belonged to a city councillor in need of scoring political points in an election year. Once the city ordinance was passed, the battle-weary Severnites and surviving victims of the war were trapped and euthanized. Animal Services cautiously handled the extraordinary amount of dead and injured raccoons who had been reported to have rabies, distemper, or some combination of the two. Unofficially, the civil workers blamed the rise in the city's coyote population for beating up the raccoons this way. Their union was cynical about any last-minute decision coming from management. In the court of public opinion, however, the city councillor had the prescience and therefore the authority to clean up their town. Hey, hey, hey! Don't be fighting like chickens in a coop, Rachel shouted at Ray and George to quit playing around and focus on the job at hand. She often ridiculed them about what happens when there are too many male raccoons together in one place. Beyond the thicket, along the border of their park, were the swollen green wheelies and excess debris slumping next to them. The smell was irresistible. It wasn't quite summer yet, but the public had taken to the airwaves to complain about a new situation arising from the garbage workers' strike. The significantly smaller raccoon population meant the green wheelies' contents had runneth over. Complicating matters for the city councillor was a young environmentalist TikTok video that had gone viral. Frustrated that their climate march had not resulted in more significant and fast-paced change, young adults across the city were abuzz with a fresh, new social media campaign to hold their leaders to account. They weren't happy they were inheriting the junk heap from the older folks, and they would expose anybody they saw greenwashing environmental stewardship. A talented videographer used his cell phone footage of a couple of raccoons opening the new generation of green bin and inserted the background music of Boots Randolph's Yakety Sax. So it was that Severn and Seth went down in history as the raccoons who humiliated the city councillor. Rose was delighted to hear the tree banter. Rory had been sleeping peacefully, curled up in her lap all this time. Now that Ricky had come for him, Rory was quick to his feet and followed his older siblings to Rat's Alley. Having survived the great cull, Rose was at peace watching her family grow up into fine individuals. The apex predators, like the hawks, were happy too. And she had to admit her husband was right. She no longer was enamored with the countryside that had been transformed by highways and subdivisions. Tonight, Rose would depart before her children came back. The gentle breeze had lifted the cherry blossom petals from the boughs above and then let them flutter to the ground in a carpet of pink. Many petals had come to rest on Rose, forming a soft contour around her body, like the first snowfall that covers the physical elements of the landscape.